After my Navy SEAL husband passed away, my daughter-in-law took his medals to a pawn shop and posted, "Easy money." On Monday, I revealed the secret that made her beg for forgiveness. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. After my husband, Navy SEAL, passed away, my daughter-in-law took his medals to the pawn shop and posted, "Easy money." On Monday, I revealed the secret that made her beg for forgiveness. I still remember the day my world shattered for the second time. The first was when I lost James, my husband of 47 years, a decorated Navy SEAL who had served his country with unwavering dedication until his retirement 15 years ago. We'd built a beautiful life together, raised our son Richard, and were enjoying our golden years when PTSD and depression, demons James had fought for decades, finally won their battle 6 months ago. That morning started like any other since his passing. I woke up reaching for him, my hand finding only cold sheets. At 72, I'd developed a routine to keep the crushing grief at bay. Coffee on the porch, tending to my garden, then answering emails from former students who still kept in touch from my teaching days. "Martha, you need to see this." The voice on the phone belonged to Eleanor, a military wife from our support group. Her tone made my stomach tighten. "It's about Stephanie and James's medals." I balanced my reading glasses on my nose and opened Facebook following Eleanor's instructions. The shock that hit me felt like a physical blow. There was my daughter-in-law, Stephanie, standing in what was clearly a pawn shop, fanning out cash with a wide smile on her face. The caption read, "Easy money, time for some self-care. Treat yourself." In the background, unmistakably, were James's medals, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Navy Cross, sacred symbols of his sacrifice and courage, unceremoniously dumped on a pawn shop counter like worthless trinkets. My hands shook so violently I dropped the phone. Those medals had been displayed proudly in our home for decades. When Richard married Stephanie 12 years ago, James had proudly shown his new daughter-in-law each medal, explaining the stories behind them. After James died, I had given them to Richard, believing they should stay with his son. I never imagined they would end up like this. I dialed Richard's number first, hoping there was some explanation, but he didn't answer. Then I tried Stephanie. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, until finally I sent a text. "I saw what you did with James's medals. How could you?" Within minutes, I was blocked. My own daughter-in-law had cut me off. The betrayal burned like acid in my chest. Those medals weren't just metal and ribbon. They were pieces of James, tangible reminders of his courage and sacrifice. And Stephanie had traded them for what? Spending money? With trembling fingers, I called Lily, my 16-year-old granddaughter, hoping she could shed some light on the situation. "Grandma?" Her voice was small, cautious. "Are you okay?" "Lily, sweetheart, do you know anything about your father's medals? The ones from Grandpa James?" A long silence followed, then a muffled sniff. "Mom sold them last week. She said, nobody cared about that old junk anymore." Old junk. James's legacy, his honor, reduced to old junk. "Where is your mother now, Lily?" "She's in Cancun, with Todd." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. "Her new boyfriend. She left 3 days ago." My blood turned to ice. James hadn't even been gone 7 months, and Stephanie was already vacationing with a new man, funded by selling my husband's military honors. "She's been going out a lot," Lily continued, her voice breaking. "She says she's reclaiming her life after being trapped with Dad and Grandpa James for so long." Lily hesitated. "Go on, sweetheart." "She told me that Grandpa was a burden, that his problems dragged everyone down. She said she was glad to be free of it all." Each word was a knife to my heart. James had struggled, yes. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the dark periods when memories of combat overtook him. But he had fought those battles with dignity, had been there for every birthday, every school event, every important moment in his family's lives. He had been anything but a burden. "Grandma, can I come stay with you for a while?" Lily asked suddenly. "I don't want to be here when she gets back." That evening I sat in James's old armchair, surrounded by photos of our life together, my mind racing. The pawn shop where Stephanie had sold the medals was across town. There was a chance, however slim, that they might still be there. I would go first thing in the morning, drain my savings if I had to, just to bring those pieces of James home where they belonged. As I finally drifted off to sleep, clutching James's old navy sweatshirt, I made a promise to him and to myself. This betrayal would not stand. I would reclaim his honor, even if it meant exposing the cruel truth about the woman who had once promised to love and respect our family. Little did I know that the medals were just the beginning, that what I would discover in the coming days would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew about James's final years, and about the woman who claimed to have loved him. The pawn shop was tucked between a laundromat and a discount liquor store, its windows plastered with neon signs advertising quick cash for gold and valuables. My heart pounded as I pushed open the door, setting off a tinny electronic chime. "Help you, ma'am?" The man behind the counter couldn't have been more than 30, with tattooed arms and a kind face that seemed at odds with the surroundings. Straightened my shoulders, summoning strength I wasn't sure I had. "My daughter-in-law brought in some military medals last week. Navy SEAL decorations. I'd like to buy them back." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "The Bronze Star and those others? Pretty lady? Paid cash?" I nodded, hope rising in my chest. "I'm real sorry, ma'am. Most of those sold already. Military collectors snap up that stuff quick, especially SEAL decorations." My knees weakened. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Which ones are gone?" He checked his records. The Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and Navy Cross went to a collector from Dallas. Got the Navy Achievement Medal and a couple service medals still here. Just like that, James's highest honors, the ones that had meant the most to him, were gone. Scattered to strangers who couldn't possibly understand their true value. "I'll take what's left," I said, my voice hollow. While the clerk packaged the remaining medals, I noticed a security camera in the corner. "Do you keep recordings of your transactions?" "For 30 days? Yeah, insurance requires it." "Could I? Would it be possible to see the recording from when my daughter-in-law came in? I'd like to know exactly what she sold." He hesitated, then nodded. "Give me a minute." On a small monitor behind the counter, I watched as Stephanie cheerfully handed over James's legacy. She joked with the clerk, haggled over the price, and seemed completely unbothered by what she was doing. No remorse, no hesitation, just a woman excited about easy cash. When the transaction was complete, she snapped the selfie I'd seen on Facebook. "Could I get a copy of this recording?" I asked, an idea forming. Normally, no, but was this some kind of theft situation? "In a way," I replied. "Those medals belonged to my husband. They weren't hers to sell." 10 minutes later, I left with the remaining medals, a DVD copy of the security footage, and a knot of determination tightening in my chest. Richard and Stephanie's house stood in a neat subdivision across town. Its perfect lawn and coordinated flower beds a testament to the image Stephanie worked so hard to maintain. I'd called ahead to make sure she wasn't back from Cancun yet. Richard was at work, but Lily had given me the garage code. "Grandma." Lily rushed into my arms the moment I entered. My granddaughter had always been tall like her grandfather, but she seemed thinner now, shadows under her eyes. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered. "The house feels so empty without Grandpa James." I held her tight, remembering how James, would swing her up onto his shoulders even when his back ached from old injuries. I know, sweetheart. I miss him every day. Mom packed away all his pictures, Lily said as she led me through the house. Right after the funeral. Said they were too depressing. Looking around, I realized she was right. The living room walls, once filled with family photos including many of James, now displayed abstract art and stylish frames containing only Stephanie, Richard, and Lily. It was as if James had been systematically erased. Where did the photos go? I asked. Mom put them in boxes in the garage, said it was healthier to move on. In the garage, we found stacks of plastic storage bins. Lily helped me locate the ones containing James's belongings. What I discovered broke my heart all over again. Photo, albums, James's navy dress uniform, books he'd cherished, all carelessly tossed together as if they were worthless junk destined for the trash. She didn't even wait a month after the funeral, Lily said, her voice cracking. Dad was still crying himself to sleep, and she was already packing Grandpa away. As we sorted through the boxes, trying to organize what remained of James's visible legacy, Lily pulled out a worn leather appointment book. I remember this, she said. Grandpa carried it everywhere. I took it from her hands, recognizing James's daily planner. He'd kept one every year of his adult life, a habit from his military days. This was his last one from the year he died. Can I look at this more closely? I asked. Lily nodded. That night, after settling Lily in my guest room, I sat at the kitchen table and carefully opened James's planner. Inside were not just appointments but notes. James had used it as a makeshift journal. Flipping through the pages, I began to see a disturbing pattern. April 15th. S threw away my medication again. Claims she forgot I needed it. Third time this month. May 6th. Another nightmare. S told me to man up and sleep on the couch if I couldn't keep quiet. June 10th. S invited friends over when she knew I was having a bad day. When I tried to go upstairs, she told everyone I was being dramatic about my so-called PTSD. Tears blurred my vision as I read entry after entry detailing Stephanie's cruelty. James had never told me any of this. He'd always insisted things were fine whenever I expressed concern about Stephanie's attitude toward his PTSD. The last entry, dated just 3 days before he died, hit me like a physical blow. S says I'm embarrassing her. Says I should be over this by now. Maybe she's right. Maybe everyone would be better off without me dragging them down. So tired of fighting. I closed the planner, my hands shaking with grief and rage. All those years, James had suffered in silence while Stephanie systematically broke him down. And now she was erasing him, selling off his honors and vacationing with another man while his memory was still warm. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Mike Collins, James's closest friend from his SEAL days. Martha, I heard. About the medals, he said without preamble. The guys and I want to help. How did you know? I asked. Lily called me. Said you might need backup. His voice softened. James was our brother, which makes you family. Whatever you need, we're there. I clutched the phone tighter, tears streaming down my face. Mike, there's something you should know. I found James's planner. The things Stephanie was saying to him, doing to him. I know, Mike said quietly. We all suspected. James wouldn't talk about it, but we could see what was happening. We tried to get him to open up, but he was protecting her, I finished, even as she was destroying him. The question is, Mike said after a moment, what do you want to do about it now? I looked down at James's planner, at the security footage from the pawn shop, and thought about the woman who had sold my husband's honors without a second thought. I want the truth to come out, I said firmly. I want his medals back, and I want Stephanie to face what she's done. What I didn't tell Mike was that I already knew exactly how to make that happen. Because what Stephanie didn't realize was that I knew her darkest secret, the one thing that would shatter the perfect image she'd built and make her beg for forgiveness. And on Monday, at the veterans' benefit she'd organized to boost her social, standing as the devoted widow of a SEAL, I was going to reveal it to everyone. The next morning, I met Mike at a small diner near the naval base where James had once trained younger SEALs after his active duty ended. The place was filled with military personnel, their quiet conversations and respectful nods a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. "I've put out feelers to track down the medals," Mike said, sliding into the booth across from me. His weathered face, lined with the same kind of experiences that had marked James, was set with determination. "The collector's community is tight-knit. If we find who bought them, I'm hoping we can appeal to their sense of honor." I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "Thank you, Mike. I can't tell you what that means." "To me?" He reached across the table, briefly squeezing my hand. "Martha, there's something else you should know. Something James made me promise not to tell you while he was alive." My heart stuttered. "What is it?" James recorded some of his interactions with Stephanie. Mike's voice dropped lower. "He was gathering evidence. I think he was planning to leave her." "Evidence?" I repeated, confused. Mike nodded grimly. "About 6 months before he died, James started carrying a small digital recorder. Said he needed people to know the truth if anything happened to him." The waitress arrived with our orders, momentarily interrupting the conversation. When she left, Mike continued, "The last time I saw him, about 2 weeks before he—" Mike paused, unable to say the word. "He gave me a flash drive. Said if anything happened to him, I should hold on to it until it was needed." Mike pulled a small, black flash drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. "I think it's needed now." Back at home, with Lily safely at a friend's house, I plugged the flash drive into my computer with trembling hands. It contained dozens of audio files, each labeled with dates. With a deep breath, I clicked on the first one. "Stephanie, I can't find my medication. Have you seen it?" James's voice, slightly tinny through the recording but unmistakably his, filled the room. My eyes welled with tears at the sound. God, not this again. Stephanie's voice was sharp, annoyed. "I'm not your keeper, James. Maybe if you weren't so scattered all the time, you'd know where your own things are." "I'm not scattered. I keep them in the same place. They're not there now." "Well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you took them all already. You pop those pills like candy." "They're prescribed, Stephanie, for my PTSD. You know that." A scoffing sound. "Your PTSD. Right. It's been, 20 years since you saw any real action? Don't you think it's time to get over it?" My stomach clenched at her callousness. James had struggled with PTSD for decades, the nightmares and flashbacks sometimes. So severe he couldn't leave the house. How many times had I held him through the night, whispering reassurances as he relived horrors I couldn't imagine? I forced myself to continue listening, moving through file after file. Each one revealed a pattern of emotional abuse more devastating than I could have imagined. Stephanie belittling James's mental health struggles. Stephanie complaining about being stuck with a broken man. Stephanie threatening to leave if he didn't pull himself together. The most recent recording, dated just a week before James died, made my blood run cold. I found these in the trash. James's voice was quiet, controlled. "So, they're trash. These are my medications, Stephanie. The ones I've been looking for all week." A pause, then. "You're better off without them. They make you weird, distant. Besides, Dr. Kellerman said you should be weaning off them by now." That's not what he said at all. I was there, remember? He said I needed to stay on them until he felt it was safe to adjust the dosage. Whatever. I'm sick of living with a zombie. It's embarrassing, James. Do you know what people say? They say I married a broken man. that I'm a saint for staying. You threw away medication prescribed for a medical condition. Do you understand how dangerous that is? I could have what? Had another one of your episodes? Jumped at shadows? Woken up screaming again? I'm done, James. I've given you 12 years of my life, and I'm done walking on eggshells. The recording ended abruptly. I sat frozen, thinking of James's planner entry just days before his death. The hopelessness, the exhaustion, the feeling that everyone would be better off without him. Now I understood. Stephanie hadn't just been cruel to James. She had actively sabotaged his treatment, pushing him deeper into the darkness when he was fighting so hard to stay in the light. My phone rang, startling me from my horrified trance. It was Richard. Mom? Is Lily with you? His voice was tense, worried. She stayed with a friend last night, I replied carefully. Is everything all right? It's Stephanie. She's coming home early from Cancun. Says she's not feeling well, but I think something else is going on. She's been acting strange ever since I confronted her about Dad's medals. My breath caught. You know about that, Lily told me. His voice cracked. I can't believe Stephanie would do something like that. Dad's medals they meant everything to him. In that moment, I made a decision. Richard, there's something you need to see. Can you come over tomorrow? Of course, Mom. He hesitated. Is it about Dad? Yes, I said quietly. It's something he wanted us to know. After hanging up, I replayed sections of the recordings, my grief gradually hardening into resolve. Stephanie had hidden her true nature from everyone, playing the devoted wife while secretly tormenting James and undermining his recovery. Now she was playing the grieving widow, accepting sympathy and admiration she didn't deserve. I thought of the veterans' benefit Stephanie had organized for Monday, a public event where she would undoubtedly position herself as James's loyal, loving widow, gathering praise for her dedication to carrying on his legacy. The same woman who had called his PTSD an embarrassment, sold his medals for vacation money, and potentially driven him to his death through her cruelty and medication sabotage. No, I wouldn't allow it. James deserved better. His memory deserved better. I called Mike back. I listened to the recordings, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And? I need your help with something else. Stephanie's hosting that veterans benefit on Monday. I know. The whole SEAL community got invitations. She's presenting herself as the grieving widow carrying on James's legacy. His disgust was evident. I want to be there, I said, and I want to bring these recordings. A long pause. Are you sure that's what you want to do, Martha? It'll be public. Messy. I thought of James, alone and hopeless in his final days, believing he was a burden. I thought of Stephanie, smiling for her easy money selfie with his medals. James spent his whole life serving with honor, I said finally. The least we can do is make sure the truth about his final battle is known. He deserves that much. All right, Mike said solemnly. The team will be there, whatever you need. As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For months I'd been drowning in grief, feeling powerless against the crushing weight of James's absence. But now I had purpose. I would reclaim his medals, restore his honor, and ensure that Stephanie's mask of devoted widow was torn away forever. Monday couldn't come soon enough. Sunday morning dawned with a clarity I hadn't felt since before James died. For months, I'd moved through life in a fog of grief. But now purpose drove me forward. I had promised James in the darkness of countless nights that I would always protect him. I hadn't been able to save him in life, but I could defend his memory, his honor. Richard arrived just after 10, his face drawn with worry. At 38, he looked so much like James at that age. The same steady gaze, the same quiet strength. But with shadows under his eyes that spoke of recent turmoil. Mom, he said, embracing me tightly. What's going on? You sounded so serious on the phone. I led him to the kitchen table where my laptop sat open. There's something you need to hear. Something your father recorded before he died. Richard's brow furrowed. Recorded? What do you mean? Sit down, honey. I touched his arm gently. This won't be easy to hear. For the next hour, we listened together to selections from James's recordings. Richard's reactions progressed from confusion to disbelief to a raw, visceral anger I'd never seen in him before. When the final recording ended, Stephanie berating James for having a panic attack at a dinner party, Richard buried his face in his hands. I had no idea, he whispered. Dad never said anything. He always defended her when I noticed tension between them. He was protecting you, I said softly, and he was ashamed. You know how he was. He saw it as his failure, not hers. Richard looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. All these months, she's been playing the devastated widow, accepting condolences, organizing this benefit. His voice hardened. While selling his medals for vacation money with her boyfriend. I nodded, letting him process the betrayal at his own pace. The night before Dad died, Richard said slowly, I called the house. Stephanie said he was having one of his episodes and couldn't come to the phone. He swallowed hard. I should have gone over there. I should have checked on him. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. Stephanie created an environment where James felt hopeless. She undermined his treatment and his dignity. Richard stood, abruptly pacing the kitchen. What do we do now? Take this to the police? Can she be charged with something? I shook my head. What she did was cruel, but proving it contributed directly to his death would be nearly impossible. I took a deep breath. But we can make sure everyone knows who she really is. I explained my plan for the veterans' benefit the next day. Richard listened intently, occasionally nodding. It'll be messy, he said finally. Very public. Does that bother you? I asked. He shook his head. No. Dad lived his whole life with honor. He deserves the truth, however uncomfortable. A pause. I want to be part of this, Mom. I should be standing with you. Relief flooded through me. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I'd needed Richard's support. There's something else, Richard said, pulling out his phone. When Lily told me about the medals, I started checking our accounts. Look at this. He showed me a banking app displaying recent transactions, large withdrawals, expensive purchases, in stores James would never have frequented. These started just a few weeks after Dad died, Richard explained. Almost $35,000 withdrawn in the last 5 months. Money that was supposed to be for Lily's college fund. My heart sank. Does Stephanie have access to all your accounts? We combined everything when we got married. I never thought. He trailed off. There's more. She's been telling everyone Dad died saving his team members during a training accident. What? James retired from active missions 15 years ago. Richard nodded grimly. But it makes for a better story than suicide, doesn't it? More heroic, more sympathy for her. He ran a hand through his hair. She's been using this lie to get attention, special treatment, even financial support from veterans organizations. The manipulation was even more extensive than I'd realized. Not only had Stephanie emotionally abused James and sold his medals, but she was also profiting from a fabricated story of his death while draining the accounts meant for Lily's future. We need to add this to tomorrow's plan, I said. Richard nodded, a determined look settling on his face. I'll gather the bank statements, evidence of every withdrawal, every purchase, and I'll contact Mike again. His connections in the SEAL community will be crucial. Later that afternoon, Mike arrived with news. We found the collector who bought James's medals, he announced, settling onto my couch. A retired Marine in Dallas. When I explained the situation, he agreed to return them, for what he paid, not a penny more. Said he wouldn't keep medals obtained through such dishonorable means. That's wonderful, I breathed. When can we get them? That's the thing. He's driving them up himself. Wants to personally return them to James's family. Mike checked his watch. Should be here around 9 tonight. True to his word, at 9:15 that evening, a solemn man in his 60s arrived at my door holding a polished wooden case. Mrs. Kingsley, he said, extending his hand. Colonel Frank Townsend, USMC, retired. It's an honor to meet you, ma'am. Inside, the case, nestled in velvet, lay James's medals, the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and Navy Cross, restored to their rightful place. Thank you, I whispered, my voice catching. You have no idea what this means to us. Colonel Townsend nodded gravely. My wife contacted the pawnbroker directly when she heard what happened. Seems your daughter-in-law left quite an impression, bragging about how she was finally getting something useful out of her husband's military career. Each new revelation of Stephanie's callousness strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about James anymore. It was about Lily's future, about Richard's awakening to the truth, about ensuring that Stephanie couldn't continue to profit from her cruelty and lies. That night, after everyone had left, I sat in James's old chair holding his recovered medals, running my fingers over the engravings that commemorated his courage and sacrifice. We're going to make this right, I whispered to his photograph on the side table. Tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. I spent the rest of the evening organizing the evidence, the recordings, the bank statements Richard had provided, the video from the pawn shop, printed screenshots of Stephanie's easy money post, and statements from James's doctors confirming his medication regimen, the same medications Stephanie had thrown away. In the morning, I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress James had always loved, pinned one of his navy pins to my lapel, and placed the evidence in my handbag. Richard would meet me at the venue with Lily, who deserved to know the truth about her grandfather's final days and her mother's deceptions. As I stepped out my front door, I felt James's presence beside me, as tangible as if he were holding my hand. For the first time since his death, I wasn't drowning in grief. I was channeling it into purpose, into justice. The Veterans Benefit was being held at the Grand Ballroom of the Oceanside Hotel, a venue famous for its panoramic views of the Pacific. Stephanie had spared no expense, using whose money, I now wondered, to create an impressive event. Banners bearing James's image and the Navy SEAL emblem hung from the walls. A table near the entrance displayed photos of James in uniform, looking strong and proud, alongside neatly printed cards describing his heroic sacrifice. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the weight of the evidence inside. In 3 hours, when Stephanie took the stage to give her keynote speech about honoring her husband's legacy, I would be ready. The truth would finally come to light. The Grand Ballroom was filling up rapidly. Men and women in military uniforms mingled with civilians in formal attire, all gathered under the pretense of honoring James's memory. I recognized many faces, former colleagues from James's SEAL team, friends from the Veterans Support Group, community members who had admired him. Mike materialized at my elbow, looking distinguished in his dress blues. Martha, you ready for this? I nodded, my hands steady despite the gravity of what was to come. Where's Stephanie? In the green room, practicing her speech. His expression darkened. You should hear what she's planning to say about James. Tales of heroism that never happened. Stories she's invented wholesale. Then it's time those stories were corrected, I said softly. Richard arrived with Lily, both looking solemn. My granddaughter rushed to embrace me, and I held her close, drawing strength from her presence. Grandma, Mom's telling everyone Grandpa died saving his team, she whispered. It's not true. I heard her laughing about it on the phone with Todd, saying people will believe anything about a dead hero. Richard's jaw tightened as he overheard his daughter's words. "It ends today," he said with quiet determination. "All of it." We took our seats near the front, where Stephanie had placed us for maximum visual effect, the grieving family supporting the devoted widow. The irony was almost too much to bear. At precisely noon, Stephanie made her entrance, gliding onto the stage in a tasteful black dress, her expression a perfect mask of dignified grief. The audience applauded politely as she approached the podium. "Thank you all for coming today," she began, her voice catching with practiced emotion. "6 months ago, I lost my husband, the love of my life, Senior Chief Petty Officer James Kingsley." I watched her performance with a detached fascination. The slight tremor in her voice, the way she blinked back tears at just the right moment. She had rehearsed this, perfected it. How many times had she practiced looking heartbroken in the mirror? "James died as he lived, with unparalleled courage," she continued. "During a training exercise, when a younger SEAL was in danger, James didn't hesitate. He sacrificed his own life to save another." Murmurs of admiration rippled through the audience. I glanced at Richard, who was nearly vibrating with suppressed rage. "In the months since his passing, I've dedicated myself to preserving his legacy," Stephanie said, her voice stronger now. "Today's benefit will establish the James Kingsley Foundation for Veterans, supporting those who, like my beloved husband, have given everything for our freedom." She gestured to a large poster displaying the foundation's proposed logo, James's silhouette against an American flag. "With your generous donations, we'll ensure that James's spirit of sacrifice continues to inspire future generations." It was too much. This woman, who had belittled James's PTSD, thrown away his medication, sold his medals, and drained his family's accounts, was now positioning herself to receive donations in his name. Money she would undoubtedly misappropriate, just as she had Lily's college fund. Mike squeezed my arm gently. "It's time, Martha." I nodded and rose slowly to my feet. All around me, the audience continued to watch Stephanie, unaware of the truth about to shatter her carefully constructed facade. "Before I continue," Stephanie was saying, "I'd like to acknowledge my mother-in-law, Martha, who has been such a pillar of strength." "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "I'd like to say something." Stephanie froze, her practiced smile faltering for just a moment before she recovered. "Of course, Martha. Please join me." As I made my way to the stage, Richard and Mike moved to the audio-visual booth where they had arranged to have the evidence ready to display. Lily remained in her seat, her young face set with a determination beyond her years. Stephanie's smile remained fixed as I reached the podium, but her eyes flashed with warning. "Martha would like to share some memories of James," she announced smoothly, clearly attempting to control the narrative. "No," I said, my voice firm as I faced the audience. "I'm here to tell the truth about how my husband died and about the woman who claims to honor his memory." A shocked silence fell over the room. Stephanie's smile disappeared, replaced by alarm. "Martha, this isn't the time or place," she began. "It's exactly the time and place," I interrupted. "Before anyone donates a single dollar to this so-called foundation, they deserve to know who's really behind it." I nodded to Richard, who pressed a button. The large screen behind us flickered to life, displaying the security footage from the pawn shop. Stephanie's face, gleeful as she sold James's medals, filled the screen. "My daughter-in-law sold my husband's military honors for vacation money," I said into the stunned silence. "Medals he earned protecting this country, she traded for cash. To take a trip with her boyfriend. Yes, boyfriend, just months after James's death." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Stephanie lunged for the microphone, her composure shattering. "That's not what happened. Those medals they were just collecting dust. James would have wanted. I repeated, my voice sharp with disbelief. "Let's hear what James wanted in his own words." Another nod to Richard, and James's voice filled the ballroom. The recording was crystal clear, Stephanie berating him for his PTSD, mocking his suffering, admitting to throwing away his medication. Stephanie's face drained of color. "Where did you get that? You can't— that's private." "Private?" I asked. "Like the private way you tormented my husband? The private way you pushed him deeper into depression by sabotaging his treatment?" I turned back to the audience, where shocked faces stared up at the stage. James didn't die in a training accident saving a fellow SEAL. That's a lie Stephanie created to gain sympathy and financial support. My husband took his own life after months of psychological abuse, after having his medication thrown away, after being made to feel that his PTSD was a burden and an embarrassment. Colonel Townsend stood up from his seat in the second row. "Mrs. Kingsley, are you saying Senior Chief Kingsley's death was misrepresented to the Navy SEAL community?" "Yes," I said firmly. "And to the organizations that have provided benefits to Stephanie as the widow of a hero who died in the line of duty." Mike joined me on stage, holding a folder. "We have documentation from the medical examiner confirming James's cause of death, as well as statements from his doctors about his medication regimen. Medication that Stephanie admits, in these recordings, to discarding." Stephanie's face contorted with fury. "You bitter old woman. You're just jealous because James loved me more than you, because I had a life with him that you couldn't control." Her outburst, so at odds with her previous performance of grief, silenced the room. In that moment, the mask slipped completely, revealing the cruel, calculating woman beneath. Richard took the microphone next, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "My mother is telling the truth. I have proof that since my father's death, Stephanie has withdrawn nearly $35,000 from accounts meant for my daughter's education, money she spent on vacations, shopping, and her new boyfriend, Todd Reynolds." As if on cue, a man in the back of the room tried to slip out unnoticed. One of Mike's SEAL brothers blocked his path. "And here he is now," Richard continued. "The man my wife has been seeing since 3 months after my father's death, while playing the devoted widow in public." Stephanie grabbed for the microphone, her movements frantic now. "This is slander. You can't prove any of this." "Actually," I said quietly, "we can prove all of it. The recordings, the bank statements, the falsified story of James's death that you've used to collect benefits. And these—" I opened the wooden box Colonel Townsend had returned to me, revealing James's medals. "The medals you sold, which were recovered from the collector who was horrified to learn how you obtained them." Stephanie stood frozen, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. The audience had risen to their feet, their expressions a mixture of shock, disgust, and, in the case of James's fellow SEALs, cold fury. "Grandpa deserved better than you," Lily's clear voice rang out from the front row. "You made him feel worthless when he was a hero." In that moment, looking at my granddaughter's brave face, I knew we had done the right thing. James's truth was finally being told, his honor restored, his suffering acknowledged. "This event is over," I announced, turning to the stunned audience. "Instead of donations to a fraudulent foundation, I ask that you honor James's memory by supporting legitimate organizations that help veterans with PTSD, the real battle my husband fought until the end." As I stepped away from the podium, the room erupted, some people pressing forward with questions, others approaching Stephanie with looks of disgust, and James's SEAL brothers forming a protective circle around Lily, Richard, and me. Through it all, Stephanie stood alone on the stage, her facade of grieving widow shattered beyond repair, facing for the first time the consequences of her cruelty. The aftermath of the veterans' benefit unfolded with a swiftness that left me breathless. As the ballroom emptied, Stephanie was cornered by representatives from 3 different veterans organizations, demanding explanations about the funds she had solicited using her fabricated story of James's death. The hotel management quickly dismantled the foundation displays, awkwardly returning checks to stunned donors. Through it all, I remained calm, surrounded by a protective circle of James's fellow SEALs and their families. These were the people who had truly loved him, who had understood his struggles, who had tried to help when Stephanie was undermining his recovery. "Mrs. Kingsley," said a tall woman in a Navy uniform I didn't recognize. "I'm Commander Ellis. I worked with James during his last years of service." She extended her hand. "What you did today took immense courage." "I just told the truth," I said simply. "Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do." She glanced toward where Stephanie was still engaged in heated conversation. "There will be investigations. The Navy takes misrepresentation of a service member's death very seriously." Richard appeared at my side, Lily's hand firmly in his. My son looked 10 years older than he had that morning, but there was a clarity in his eyes I hadn't seen since before James died. "Mom, we should go," he said quietly. "The reporters are starting to arrive." We slipped out a side entrance, avoiding the growing media presence drawn by social media posts about the dramatic confrontation. Mike drove us back to my house, where we gathered in the living room, emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a poisonous weight had been lifted from our shoulders. "What happens now?" Lily asked, curled up beside me on the sofa. I squeezed her hand. "Now we heal, sweetheart. The right way, with truth and time." Richard paced by the window, his phone buzzing constantly with messages. "Stephanie's threatening to sue for defamation," he reported. "Says we've ruined her reputation." Mike snorted. "She ruined her own reputation the moment she started mistreating James." He glanced at his own phone. "And she won't get far with those threats. The SEAL community is already mobilizing. We've got lawyers offering pro bono representation, witnesses coming forward with their own observations of how she treated James." The days that followed brought a whirlwind of changes. Richard filed for divorce, citing the evidence we had gathered and Stephanie's financial misconduct. The Navy launched an investigation into benefits Stephanie had claimed under false pretenses. Reporters called constantly, seeking interviews about the SEAL widow scandal, as it was being called. I refused all interviews, protecting our family's privacy and James's dignity. This wasn't about public humiliation or revenge. It was about truth, about setting the record straight, about honoring James's memory properly. 2 weeks after the benefit, I received a call from Eleanor, the friend who had first alerted me to Stephanie's pawnshop post. "Martha, have you seen today's paper?" I hadn't. Since the confrontation, I'd been avoiding news coverage. "Stephanie's being charged with fraud," Eleanor continued. "Something about falsifying documents to collect benefits meant for spouses of service members who died in active duty." I wasn't surprised. The web of deception Stephanie had woven was unraveling rapidly, exposing more misconduct with each passing day. "There's something else," Eleanor added. "The collectors' community has been searching for James's other medals. They've already located 2 more. Tears sprang to my eyes. "Thank you for telling me." That evening, Richard and Lily came for dinner, a new Friday tradition we had established. Richard looked better than he had in months. The strain of living with Stephanie's manipulation finally lifted. "I got access to all the accounts today," he announced as we ate. "The judge granted an emergency order, given the evidence of Stephanie's financial misconduct." He smiled at Lily. "Your college fund is safe now, sweetheart." Lily's answering smile was cautious but real. At 16, she was showing remarkable resilience in the face of such upheaval. "I found more of Grandpa's things," she told me. "Mom had hidden boxes in the attic. There are photo albums, letters, even his old Navy jacket. I'd like to see those," I said softly. After dinner, as Richard cleared the dishes, Lily approached me with a hesitant expression. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, darling. Do you think Grandpa knew how much we loved him? Even with how Mom treated him?" The question pierced my heart. I took Lily's hands in mine. Your grandfather adored you, Lily. You were his absolute pride and joy. And yes, I believe he knew how much you and your father loved him. But it wasn't enough, she whispered, to make him stay. I pulled her close, stroking her hair as I had when she was small. PTSD is a complex illness, sweetheart. It wasn't about love not being enough. It was about pain becoming too much to bear, especially with the proper treatment being sabotaged. I tilted her face up to mine. But we can honor him now by telling his true story, by making sure people understand the real battles our veterans face. A month after the confrontation, Mike called with news that left me breathless. Martha, we found all of them. Every single one of James's medals. The community really came through. That Sunday, a small ceremony was held in my backyard. No reporters, no public spectacle, just James's SEAL brothers and their families, Richard, Lily, and a few close friends. Mike presented me with a beautiful display case containing all of James's recovered medals, each one polished to a perfect shine. On behalf of the entire Naval Special Warfare community, he said formally, we return these honors to the family of Senior Chief Petty Officer James Kingsley, with respect for his service and acknowledgement of his sacrifice. All of his sacrifices, including the invisible battles he fought at home. I ran my fingers over the glass covering the medals, tears flowing freely down my cheeks. Thank you, I whispered. Later that afternoon, as the guests mingled in the yard, Richard found me sitting on the porch swing that James had built decades ago. Mom, he said, settling beside me, I've been thinking about Dad's legacy. Oh? Stephanie. Tried to create a false narrative, a foundation built on lies. But Dad deserves something real. He took a deep breath. I've been talking with some of Dad's SEAL brothers and military psychologists. We want to establish a peer support network for veterans with PTSD and their families. Not a big foundation with overhead and bureaucracy, but something direct, personal. The kind of support system Dad needed. Pride swelled in my chest. He would love that, Richard. 6 months after James's death, we held a proper memorial. Not the glossy, sanitized version Stephanie had planned, but an honest remembrance of the complex, brave, troubled man we had loved. Dozens of veterans attended, many approaching me, afterward to share how James had helped them, mentored them, saved them. He talked me through my darkest nights, one young man told me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. When I wanted to end it all, he stayed on the phone for hours, just listening. He understood in a way no one else did. Each story was a balm to my soul, a confirmation that despite Stephanie's cruelty, despite his struggles, James had mattered deeply to so many people. His life had meaning. His kindness had rippled outward in ways he might never have recognized. As fall gave way to winter, I found myself making peace with the past. Stephanie had pled guilty to several fraud charges, avoiding jail time but receiving probation and substantial fines. She had moved away, reportedly to Florida with Todd. I felt no need to follow her story. She no longer had power over our family. Auntie. Christmas Eve, I sat in my living room surrounded by Richard, Lily, and several of James's closest SEAL friends who had become like family. James's medals gleamed in their display case on the mantel, below a photograph of him in his dress uniform, his smile genuine and proud. Lily leaned against my shoulder, following my gaze to the medals. Grandpa would be happy, wouldn't he? That we're all together? I wrapped my arm around her slender shoulders. Yes, sweetheart. I believe he would. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone by the window, watching snow begin to fall gently on the garden James had loved. I thought of all we had endured since his death, the betrayal, the pain, the revelations, and finally, the healing. We did it, James, I whispered to the quiet room. We reclaimed your story. We restored your honor. And somewhere deep in my heart, I felt his presence, Not the broken man of his final days, but the strong, kind soul I had loved for nearly 5 decades. The true James, whose legacy would now live on honestly, whose struggles would help others, whose medals were back where they belonged. In that peaceful moment, I knew that while I couldn't bring James back, I had given him something perhaps even more important: the truth. His memory would no longer be distorted by Stephanie's lies and manipulations. His battle with PTSD would not be hidden away as something shameful, but acknowledged as part of the continuing sacrifice of a brave man who had given everything for his country. And for the first time since James died, I felt not just grief, but pride. Pride in him, pride in our family, and pride in myself for finding the strength to stand up for the truth when it would have been easier to remain silent. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the garden in a pristine blanket of white. Tomorrow would bring a new day, and with it, the continuing journey of honoring James's true legacy, not through grand gestures or public foundations, but through truth, understanding, and the quiet determination to ensure that his story, all of it, would never be forgotten.